Respect isn't optional. It's a reflection of who we are. It's not something we turn on and off depending on who's watching or who's standing in front of us. It's not a courtesy reserved for titles, ranks, or social positions. It's a mirror, showing our values more clearly than any speech or declaration ever could. When we choose to respect someone, especially when no one demands it, we reveal the depth of our own humanity. And when we withhold it, the absence says more about us than it does about the person we fail to honor. In that moment on the bus, the Marine wasn't asking for special treatment. He wasn't demanding recognition or pity. He just needed a seat, a simple act of decency, something anyone could have offered without losing a thing. But no one did. Every face turned away. Every person stayed cocooned in their own world, telling themselves it wasn't their problem. That silence, that stillness, is what disrespect often looks like. It's not always loud. Sometimes it hides behind politeness, behind the excuse of being too busy, too tired, too unaware. The truth is, respect isn't tested in ceremonies or in public displays of gratitude. It's tested in small, quiet moments when we have the chance to do the right thing and no one is keeping score. A Marine, once willing to give everything for his country, stood on a bus while people who'd never faced what he had sat comfortably, pretending not to notice. That disconnect isn't about seats or space. It's about empathy. It's about whether we still recognize sacrifice when it's standing right in front of us. We live in a time where respect is often mistaken for weakness, where standing up for someone is seen as unnecessary, where looking away is easier. But that ease costs something. It chips away at the collective moral core that binds a society together. Respect is the foundation that keeps a community human. Without it, we become strangers, not just to each other, but to the best parts of ourselves. There's something powerful about the instinct to honor those who've carried burdens we can't imagine. Soldiers, veterans, first responders, everyday people who've faced pain and kept going. They remind us of resilience. Yet that reminder only matters if we let it change the way we act. Respect means noticing. It means pausing our own comfort long enough to acknowledge someone else's struggle. It means saying, "I see you," not with words, but through actions. When the SEALs entered that bus, they didn't give a lecture. They didn't have to. They simply acted. In a few seconds, they demonstrated what real respect looks like: unspoken, immediate, and grounded in principle. They didn't do it for show. They did it because honor recognizes honor. Because when you've lived by a code of loyalty and sacrifice, you can't stand by while another person who's lived it is disrespected. Their response wasn't about revenge or pride. It was about restoring balance, about reminding everyone else in that space what decency looks like in motion. Respect has nothing to do with convenience. It costs us nothing to give, yet it's priceless to the one receiving it. It's the bridge between isolation and belonging, between apathy and compassion. Every time we choose to look away, we weaken that bridge. Every time we act with respect, we strengthen it. It's in how we speak to strangers, how we treat the elderly, how we listen to those who've been ignored. It's in whether we choose to stand when someone else can't. The Marine on that bus had earned his respect long before that day. But respect isn't about earning. It's about recognizing worth that already exists. We don't give respect because someone demands it. We give it because they deserve it as a fellow human being. That's what separates real respect from formality. It's not about rank or uniform. It's about the shared dignity that binds us together, no matter who we are or what we've done. When we talk about values, integrity, courage, loyalty, respect is what threads them all together. It's the foundation that allows those ideals to mean something. Without respect, courage becomes aggression, loyalty turns into blind following, and integrity fades into words with no weight. Respect gives those traits direction and purpose. It reminds us that strength without compassion is hollow, and authority without humility is dangerous. Every society is built on invisible agreements, promises we make to each other about how we'll behave, how we'll treat one another. Respect is at the core of that promise. It's what turns a group of people into a community. It's what keeps justice from turning into judgment, and service from turning into self-interest. It's not taught through rules or regulations, but through example. When we witness respect, we feel it. It resonates. It changes how we move through the world. True strength shows in how we treat the wounded, not the powerful. It's easy to honor someone at the top, the decorated, the commanding, the ones who walk into a room and draw attention without trying. But strength isn't about bowing to authority or chasing influence. It's about empathy. It's about seeing the person who's been hurt, who's struggling, who's carrying invisible weight, and treating them with the same respect you'd give a leader. The way we respond to weakness, not power, is what exposes the truth about our character. The Marine on that bus had already proven his strength in ways most people never will. He'd stood in deserts and jungles, carried brothers through gunfire, faced fear that civilians can't even picture. But now, in this ordinary moment, he was wounded, not by war, but by indifference. The world moved around him as if he were invisible. The power he once embodied in uniform no longer made people look up, it made them look away. And in that gap between his service and their silence, something raw was revealed about how society defines worth. People often think strength looks like dominance, loud, unshakable, confident. But real strength isn't about being unbreakable. It's about how we treat those who have been broken. The SEALs who boarded that bus understood that instinctively. They didn't see a man who was weak or pitiful. They saw a fellow warrior, a brother whose scars were the proof of his courage. They saw the kind of strength that endures pain quietly, without complaint. And because they recognized that, their reaction came not from pity, but from deep respect. In every part of life, there are people like that Marine, the wounded ones, the ones who've given more than they had, who've been through battles others will never see. They walk beside us every day. Sometimes their wounds are visible, a limp, a scar, a missing limb. Other times they're hidden, the invisible marks of grief, trauma, exhaustion, or loss. And yet, too often, we look right past them, drawn instead to those who project power and control. We are conditioned to chase confidence, to admire victory, to celebrate winners. But the heart of humanity lies with the ones who keep showing up even after life has knocked them down. True strength doesn't look down on others, it lifts them up. It recognizes pain and responds with compassion, not judgment. It doesn't measure people by what they can do for us, but by what they've already endured. The SEALs on that bus didn't make a show of their power. They didn't bark orders or demand respect through fear. Their presence spoke for itself. They stood up for the Marine not because they needed to prove something, but because they couldn't stand to see strength disrespected in any form. That's the quiet authority that comes from character, not control. In a world obsessed with appearances, real strength often hides in plain sight. It's the mother who works 3 jobs and still finds time to smile at her kids. It's the veteran who battles pain every morning and still holds the door open for someone else. It's the student who fails, tries again, and keeps trying even when no one notices. Strength isn't in winning every fight. It's in choosing to stay kind, even after the world has been cruel. When we measure people by their titles, wealth, or popularity, we miss the chance to see what matters most. Power can be taken away in a moment. Respect, courage, resilience, those come from within. The way we treat the wounded reveals whether we understand that difference. Because when we honor someone who's hurting, we're really honoring the values we claim to believe in: gratitude, empathy, and shared humanity. The Marine on that bus didn't need help standing. He needed acknowledgement, a simple gesture that said, "We see you, and you still matter." That's all any wounded person needs. Not pity, not attention, but recognition. The SEALs understood that better than anyone. They'd seen what happens when people fall and no one reaches out a hand. They'd lived through the kind of moments where compassion meant survival. So when they took over that bus, they didn't just correct an act of disrespect. They reminded everyone watching that real strength never forgets its duty to the fallen. Every day, we have the same choice. We can chase after those who hold power, or we can stand beside those who've lost it. We can admire success, or we can respect endurance. Power impresses, empathy transforms. And when we start treating the wounded with the same reverence we give to the strong, we begin to understand that the two are not opposites. They are parts of the same truth, that strength is not about dominance, but about care. It's not shown in how loudly we speak, but in how gently we act when someone else's voice has been silenced. Silence in the face of disrespect is its own form of consent. It's the quiet that echoes louder than words, the stillness that says, "I see what's happening, and I choose to do nothing." People like to believe that staying out of a situation means staying neutral, but neutrality doesn't exist when someone is being humiliated or wronged. Inaction is a decision. It's a vote for the side of comfort over conscience. And too often, that choice defines moments where integrity should have spoken instead. On that bus, no one yelled, no one cursed, no one openly mocked the Marine. But no one stood up either. The disrespect wasn't loud or violent. It was silent and collective. A whole bus full of people saw a wounded veteran standing and decided that keeping their seats was easier than doing what was right. That kind of silence isn't harmless. It's participation by omission. Every second that passed was a message, not from one cruel person, but from an entire crowd too afraid or too numb to care. Silence feels safe. It protects us from confrontation, from judgment, from becoming the next target. But it also protects the problem. It gives space for disrespect, prejudice, and cruelty to thrive without challenge. In that quiet, people convince themselves they're innocent. It's not my business. Someone else will say something. Maybe I misunderstood. Those thoughts are the sound of conscience trying to negotiate with fear. And fear almost always wins when courage doesn't step in to stop it. The SEALs didn't hesitate when they saw the Marine standing. They didn't analyze or debate whether it was their place to act. They didn't need a reason beyond the obvious. What they saw was wrong. Their instinct to intervene came from years of training, yes, but also from something deeper, a moral reflex. They had learned that silence, in the face of disrespect or injustice, corrodes the spirit of a team, a nation, or a person. It's the small compromises, the moments we say nothing when something should be said, that start to erode who we are. Most people think they'd speak up if faced with disrespect. But the truth is, silence is easier when we're surrounded by others who are also silent. The pressure to conform is powerful. No one wants to be the first to break the calm, to draw attention, to risk being wrong or ridiculed. That's why change rarely starts with a crowd. It starts with one person deciding they can't stay quiet anymore. One person willing to make the stillness uncomfortable. Everyday disrespect happens in places much quieter than that bus. It happens in workplaces where someone's contributions are ignored because of their background. It happens in schools where a student is teased while teachers look away. It happens in families, in communities, in online spaces where cruelty hides behind humor and people scroll past it because saying something feels inconvenient. The result is always the same. Silence normalizes the behavior. It teaches the offenders that what they're doing is acceptable, and it teaches the witnesses that their discomfort doesn't matter. When silence becomes routine, it changes us. It builds layers of apathy that numb our empathy. The first time we ignore disrespect, it stings. The second time, it feels easier. By the 10th time, we barely notice. That's how indifference spreads, not through bad people doing bad things, but through good people doing nothing. The SEALs on that bus refused to let silence define them. They understood that inaction, even for a moment, would make them complicit. Their decision to act wasn't about pride. It was about responsibility. Speaking up doesn't always mean confrontation. Sometimes it's as simple as standing up, offering a hand, or breaking the illusion that disrespect goes unseen. The smallest interruption, a glance, a word, a gesture, can shift the balance in a room. It reminds others that someone is paying attention, that decency still has a voice. And once one person acts, silence loses its power. The tension breaks, and the truth comes through. The hardest part about speaking up is not the fear of being wrong. It's the fear of standing alone. But real courage often starts in solitude. It's born from the understanding that our integrity matters more than our comfort. Every time we choose silence over action, we protect ourselves at the cost of someone else's dignity. Every time we speak, even shakily, we give others permission to find their voice too. The people on that bus will likely remember that moment. Some will remember the Marine. Some will remember the SEALs. But what will haunt them most is their own silence. That split second when they could have done something and didn't. Because once you realize that silence is a form of consent, it becomes impossible to sit quietly again when you see disrespect unfold. It becomes a matter of conscience, of self-respect, of who you decide to be when no one is Brotherhood and honor don't end when the uniform comes off. They aren't stitched into the fabric of a jacket or written into a code that expires when the mission ends. They live inside the people who carried those values through fire, fear, and loss. For those who've served, Marines, SEALs, soldiers, medics, the bond built in combat doesn't fade with time or distance. It's a thread that connects them long after the war, long after the applause, long after the world stops noticing. That brotherhood is built on something deeper than shared duty. It's built on trust, on sacrifice, on knowing that someone else's life once depended on your choices. That kind of bond doesn't break just because the battlefield changes. When the SEALs stepped onto that bus, they didn't see a stranger. They saw a brother. They saw a man who had walked the same hard road, who had paid the same price in pain and memory. His limp, his scars, his silence. They recognized it all because they carried their own versions of it. They didn't need introductions or explanations. The moment they saw him standing there, disrespected and ignored, something unspoken passed between them. Brotherhood isn't about blood or uniform color. It's about shared experience and mutual understanding. It's knowing what another person has endured without needing words. Honor works the same way. It's not a medal or a title. It's the invisible compass that keeps people grounded when the world around them forgets its direction. Honor is what tells someone to stand up when others sit down, to speak when silence would be easier, to protect the dignity of another even when it costs nothing and no one else notices. Those SEALs didn't act because they wanted to be seen as heroes. They acted because honor demanded it. To them, letting that Marine stand while others sat wasn't just disrespect. It was a violation of everything they'd ever stood for. In the military, brotherhood and honor are survival tools. You learn quickly that your strength isn't just your own. It's built on trust, the kind that runs deep enough to make you risk your life for someone else without hesitation. But outside that world, society often forgets those values. People move fast, focused on their own goals, their own comfort, their own small realities. The sense of duty to others fades. The shared bond of responsibility weakens. That's why acts like what happened on that bus matter so much. They're reminders that the code doesn't have to end when the war does. It can live on in everyday life, in how we treat each other, in the standards we refuse to lower. For those who've served, brotherhood doesn't fade because it was never about circumstance. It was about character. You don't stop being a Marine or a SEAL or a soldier just because you've come home. The discipline, the loyalty, the instinct to protect, they become part of who you are. When the SEALs saw that Marine, they didn't see a civilian scene. They saw a battlefield of respect, and they knew which side they were on. That's what honor looks like when it's lived instead of spoken. What made that moment powerful wasn't just the SEAL's action, but what it represented. That even when the rest of the world forgets, some people still live by a code. It's a quiet kind of strength, the kind that doesn't need to announce itself. It's the same code that makes veterans stop to help each other on the street, that makes them nod when they pass another in uniform, that makes them carry the memory of those who didn't make it home as if they're still right beside them. That brotherhood is a promise that outlasts time. Honor without brotherhood is empty, and brotherhood without honor is blind. The two depend on each other. Brotherhood gives honor meaning. Honor gives brotherhood direction. Together, they build a foundation that can't be shaken by ego, fear, or apathy. When those SEALs took that moment to act, they weren't just defending one man's dignity. They were defending the very principles that bind every person who's ever worn a uniform. They reminded everyone there that service isn't something you retire from. It's a lifelong responsibility to stand up for what's right, no matter where you are. In civilian life, people often forget how powerful that sense of unity can be. Everyone is chasing something: success, recognition, comfort, and the idea of standing up for someone else without reward feels rare. But the world needs that kind of loyalty. It needs reminders that brotherhood isn't limited to soldiers. It's something we can all practice. It's in how we look out for each other, how we refuse to let anyone stand alone when they've already carried more than their share of pain. The uniform may come off, but the code doesn't. Brotherhood and honor live on in actions, not symbols. They're carried forward in moments when no one's watching, in the quiet decisions that define who we are when there's nothing to gain. The SEALs didn't reclaim that bus to make a point. They reclaimed it to keep a promise. The same promise every soldier makes when they take that oath: to never leave a brother behind. In war or in peace, one act of courage can shift an entire room or a bus. It doesn't take a crowd to change a moment. It doesn't take speeches, arguments, or confrontation. Sometimes, it just takes one person deciding that silence isn't acceptable anymore. Courage doesn't always look heroic. Most of the time, it's quiet, steady, and almost invisible until it breaks through the stillness and changes everything around it. When the SEALs stood up for that Marine, their courage didn't come from adrenaline or anger. It came from conviction, the deep, immovable belief that respect must be defended even when no one else is willing to move. In that instant, the energy on the bus changed. The same people who had looked away now looked up. The same air that felt thick with indifference became charged with something else: awareness, accountability, even shame. That's the power of a single courageous act. It doesn't just protect the one being wronged. It exposes the complacency of everyone else. It wakes people up. It reminds them that doing nothing is also a choice, and that choice has weight. Courage doesn't always roar. Sometimes it's the steady voice that says, "Enough." It's the decision to act when others hesitate. It's the simple motion of standing when everyone else stays seated. The SEALs didn't need to make a scene. They didn't need to yell or demand. They just acted, and that action spoke louder than any lecture could. They didn't just take over a bus. They took over the atmosphere of indifference that had filled it moments before. That's what courage does. It alters the emotional temperature of a space. It replaces apathy with awareness. Most people underestimate the ripple effect of one small act. We imagine courage as something dramatic: soldiers charging into battle, firefighters running into flames, protesters standing against injustice. But courage also lives in everyday decisions. It's in the moment you choose kindness over convenience, truth over comfort, responsibility over indifference. When one person finds their courage, it gives permission for others to find theirs too. People who were silent start speaking. People who were still start moving. One spark of courage turns into momentum. On that bus, before the SEALs arrived, fear and indifference ruled. Nobody wanted to be the first to do something. Everyone was waiting for someone else to lead. Then courage entered the room. Not loud, not dramatic, but certain. That certainty became contagious. It reminded everyone that the right thing doesn't need an invitation. It just needs a decision. In that way, courage becomes leadership without words. It turns bystanders into witnesses and witnesses into participants. Courage is not the absence of fear. It's the decision that something else matters more. Those SEALs didn't act because they weren't afraid of confrontation. They acted because respect mattered more than comfort. That's the core of real bravery. Understanding that what's at stake isn't your pride, it's your principles. Every act of courage comes with a cost, even a small one. Maybe it's social discomfort, maybe it's judgment, maybe it's misunderstanding. But the cost of silence is always higher. The cost of doing nothing is letting wrongness stand unchallenged. In every space, a bus, a workplace, a classroom, a home, courage has the same effect. It interrupts patterns. It stops the slide toward indifference. One act of courage can make people rethink what they've accepted as normal. It can expose what's been hidden under politeness or fear. It can turn an ordinary day into a moment people never forget. That's what happened on that bus. The SEALs didn't just protect a Marine's dignity. They forced everyone there to confront their own. Courage doesn't always come from strength. Sometimes it comes from compassion, from empathy so strong that staying silent feels unbearable. It's not about being fearless. It's about caring enough to take the risk. That kind of courage doesn't just defend others. It transforms the one who shows it. Every time you act with courage, you reinforce your own sense of integrity. You remind yourself that your values aren't negotiable, that your actions align with what you believe. When courage appears, it shifts perspective. It changes the story. What was once a moment of neglect becomes a lesson in respect. What was once silence becomes a turning point. People remember courage because it confronts them with what they could have done but didn't. It exposes the gap between knowing what's right and doing what's right. And even if it makes them uncomfortable, that discomfort is what drives change the next time. The SEALs' act of courage didn't just restore one man's dignity. It restored something in everyone who witnessed it. It reminded them that courage doesn't require uniform, rank, or recognition. It just requires humanity. It's available to anyone willing to step forward when everyone else steps back. That's why one act can shift an entire room. It challenges the complacency that keeps people passive. It reignites empathy that's been buried under fear. It shows that even in the smallest spaces, a city bus, a crowded room, a single moment, courage can still rewrite the atmosphere completely. The measure of character is revealed when no one's watching. It's not shown in moments of applause or when doing the right thing earns recognition. It's revealed in the quiet spaces, in the choices made when the cameras are off, when the crowd has moved on, when no one will ever know what you did. True character lives in those unseen decisions, the ones that test whether your values are real convictions or just words you say to fit the moment. When that Marine stood on the bus, surrounded by people who saw him and chose to look away, everyone's character was quietly being measured. The difference between talk and truth shows up in silence. The passengers didn't shout insults or mock the Marine, but their stillness spoke louder than any words could. It said, "This isn't my problem." Character is built or broken in those moments of passivity. It's not about grand gestures or public heroism. It's about what we decide when there's no reward for choosing right. Each person on that bus had a chance to show decency. Each chose comfort instead. But when the SEALs stepped on board, their instinct revealed something powerful. That integrity isn't something you turn on and off. It's a way of being. People like to think of character as something proven in big moments. The crisis, the test, the challenge that defines you. But real character shows itself long before that. It's in how you treat the server at a restaurant, how you speak about people who can't defend themselves, how you act when you think no one will notice. It's the invisible trail of small decisions that shape who you are. The SEALs didn't suddenly develop honor when they saw the Marine. They carried it with them already. It was ingrained in their sense of identity, forged through years of discipline, respect, and shared sacrifice. When the moment came, they didn't hesitate because acting with character had become second nature. Character isn't about perfection, it's about consistency. Anyone can be kind once, generous once, brave once. What defines character is the pattern, doing the right thing over and over until it becomes reflex. The people who sat and ignored the Marine probably didn't think of themselves as disrespectful. They were just indifferent. But indifference is the slow erosion of character. Every time you choose convenience over conscience, it becomes a little easier to do it again. The SEALs chose differently. They chose to protect dignity, even when it wasn't theirs that was threatened. When no one is watching, the world feels smaller. The pressure to perform disappears, and what's left is who you really are. That's why moments like the one on the bus matter so much. They strip away excuses and reveal truth. It's easy to praise integrity in theory. It's harder to live it in motion. When the SEALs acted, they didn't know anyone would notice. They didn't do it for a headline or recognition. They did it because their inner compass pointed one direction and nothing could make them ignore it. That's the essence of character, doing right simply because it's right. Every society depends on people with that kind of quiet strength. Rules and systems can't hold everything together. Only integrity can. When people consistently do the right thing without being watched, trust grows. Communities become stronger. Respect becomes part of the culture. But when people only behave decently under supervision, the foundation weakens. The bus that day was a small reflection of that truth, a snapshot of how much character matters when authority isn't present to enforce decency. Character doesn't demand credit. It doesn't seek validation. It doesn't shout about itself. It's visible through presence, not performance. It's the reason someone picks up trash that isn't theirs, defends someone who's quiet, or returns a lost wallet without expecting a thank you. It's built slowly, through repetition, through the daily decision to stay aligned with your principles. And when tested, in those fleeting, unexpected moments, it speaks for you louder than words ever could. The SEALs didn't have to act that day. They could have stayed quiet, taken their seats, and minded their own business. No one would have blamed them. But they understood something deeper, that what you tolerate reflects who you are. Allowing disrespect, even once, chips away at the integrity you've built. Their decision to step forward was a reminder that true character doesn't need an audience. It just needs opportunity. The people on that bus learned something that day, whether they admitted it or not. They saw how quickly the presence of character can shift an entire environment. It doesn't demand obedience, it inspires it. Real integrity makes others question their own silence. It doesn't humiliate, it teaches. It doesn't dominate, it leads by example. One act of courage rooted in character can turn apathy into awareness. It's a ripple that continues long after the moment ends. When no one's watching, character is the only guide that matters. It's what keeps people steady when rules can't reach them. It's what drives respect when no one is keeping score. It's the quiet force behind every act of courage, every moment of empathy, every choice to stand up for what's right even when no one will ever know you did.